everybody. I tell you, I am right back from the hearing that we have done this morning with the CEOs of Facebook and Twitter and Google. It was really interesting. You know, they really are the Valley of the Gods and consider them to be in charge of what you can see and hear online. And it was amazing to me. They have no intention, Twitter has no intention of taking the block off the New York Post. They have no intention of changing the way they're looking at some of this censorship. They feel like they're doing all things right, and it's just everybody else's problem. And I've got two guys that are pretty familiar with this situation. Sean Davis, who co-founded the Federalist, and so we just were laughing about everybody pronounces his name so many different ways. Sohrab Ahmari, and we got that pronunciation right and wanted to be sure that we honor him with the correct pronunciation. So thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Ahmari, I've got to start with you because people are astounded that the New York Post, which is your paper is 200 years old, I think. Alexander Hamilton founded this paper. It has been in continual production. You have one of the top 5 distributorships and readerships in the country. Is that correct?
That's
Am I right so far?
We're the 4th largest by circulation.
The 4th largest. Okay. So for people that are not really familiar with what happened with the Hunter Biden laptop, emails, the accusations, give us just a quick run through there.
Sure, and thank you for having me, Madam Senator. Obviously, I should say that I was not involved in any of the reporting and editing of our stories on the Hunter files. I'm the op-ed editor, so I deal with the opinion side. So I saw our first story when everyone else did at 5 in the morning, disclosing emails that showed that Hunter Biden had arranged, it seemed, a meeting with his father, then the Vice President of the United States, and executives from a company called Burisma, Ukrainian energy company, at a time when Biden, the vice president, had enormous influence over the fate of that country. And we recovered this laptop, this hard drive from a repair shop owner. It was never picked up. I think most people know the background. But at any rate, so we published a story based on more kind of hard evidentiary corroboration than any number of other stories from the center-left that were anti-Trump from the past 4 years that collapsed under minimal factual scrutiny. Yet none of those were censored. But that Thursday at 10 a.m. in the morning, it began with Facebook, actually. Andy Stone, an executive in the communications office of Facebook, tweeted that he wouldn't post our awful story, and pending fact-checking, Facebook is taking steps to quote-unquote reduce circulation on the story. And this was unprecedented because there have been plenty of stories that are unverified or haven't been fact-checked, and yet Facebook doesn't censor them. And then later that day, Twitter took similar action where it barred its users from sharing the story in their public news feeds. But more sinisterly and alarmingly, it also barred them from sharing it in direct private messages as well. And then later that day, they also locked us out of our account, which has 2 million followers. So just to reiterate a point you already made, which is that this is not some shady website. This is America's oldest continuously published newspaper, 4th largest by circulation, founded by Alexander Hamilton. And our story has continued to hold up. In other words, neither Mr. Joe nor Hunter Biden has denied the authenticity of the emails. Neither of them has denied the ownership of the laptop. The director of national intelligence said that this story is not Russian disinformation. The FBI and the Department of Justice reiterated the same point. These are not necessarily organs of the state that are friendly to the Trump administration all the time. So again, they're objective, and yet we continue to be locked out of our account.
And this is the type of censorship that you see in somewhere like China or Iran or Russia. You would expect to see that. You don't expect to see online, the internet, which is set up as an information service, not a news service, an information service. You do not expect to see that type of censorship. All right, Mr. Davis, looking from your perspective, you're another journalist. You've had your battles with big tech. What is your take on what ended up happening with the New York Post on this story?
Well, thank you for having me so much. Yes, I think what was done to the New York Post was criminal. They didn't use hacked information. They didn't use disinformation. They used factual reporting that was critical to the favored candidate of the big tech oligarch intelligentsia. And they have decided they will not countenance any sort of criticism or investigation or probing into the Democrats that they want to win office. And rather than actually looking at the facts and disputing them to the extent they're even disputable and saying, well, we don't think this checks out, we don't think this checks out. They straight up just lied and said it was hacked, which was never true. The New York Post actually had the receipt from the laptop repairman. It wasn't hacked, it was surrendered. They had constructive ownership of it. And the media just decided they were gonna lie about it. It's awful what's happening. It's Bolshevik and it's totalitarian.
Yeah, and when you were on with me last, we talked about Google and how they censored your content and threatened to deplatform the Federalist. So walk us through what happened and where you are now.
Right, so we've heard lots about election interference and disinformation, and it turns out that a foreign government-affiliated outfit in the UK conspired with a foreign affiliate of NBC and Google PR execs to try and deplatform the Federalist. And the reason they went after us was because we had published an article saying that the media was lying to the American people about the true nature of the Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots. And Google never told us we broke any rules ever. To this date, I have not received a communication from Google saying that we violated any of their rules. Yet this foreign group colluded with Google PR to ban us from using Google's network to sell ads on our site. And when they got busted, when they got caught, they completely changed the rationale and said, no, wait a minute, it wasn't that article, it wasn't your content, it's your comment section. And we don't like your comment section. And the irony of that to me is really striking, because Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act says that platforms, whether they're comment sections or social media, they don't have to be held liable for the speech of third parties. And yet we had Google coming to us under false pretenses and saying, you know what, we're going to use the liabilities given to us by federal law, but we're going to deny them to you. And we're going to claim that your comment section, which you don't moderate and which has comments from third parties, reflects poorly on you. And we're going to ban you from circulating ads. I mean, this is what's happening. We have a bunch of big tech left-wing Silicon Valley oligarchs trying to control the conversation in this country.
Well, and it's such a dangerous place for us to be. And I have to tell you, I think the fact that people are doing more of their work, children are doing more of their education at home, that now people are more aware of this. And I have to tell you, Mr. Ahmari, I look at this and what happened with you all, and I think that what we are seeing is big tech is saying this is our line of thought. And if there is a divergent viewpoint, we're not going to hear it because we have put down a pathway. It's like artificial intelligence. And they're trying to do mind control, if you will, and say, this is what we're going to allow and this is what we will not allow.
Yeah, and I think Sean made a very good point. I'm glad he brought up the Communications Decency Act because, I personally believe it's time to either reform or reinterpret the law because the law was intended to allow platforms to be platforms to act like bulletin boards so that anyone could come and have their say as long as it wasn't prurient or pornographic or what have you, and it still gave them the right to censor that kind of material without facing liabilities of a publisher. Like if I publish libelous material on the New York Post, I would face libel charges, or the New York Post would, God forbid. So we act like a publisher. And as you said, Senator, they're increasingly acting like publishers. They have a worldview. They will put out certain stories that reflect, well, almost always for the left. And they will try to debunk our story, even as they don't allow us to circulate it in their own voice, as Twitter, and certainly the censorship as well. So they're acting like publishers. They're no longer acting like the bulletin boards that was in the mind of Congress when it enacted the Communications Decency Act.
That's right. And that is why we're continuing. I have the legislation that would reform Section 230, the Online Freedom and Viewpoint Diversity Act. Sean, last question. How dangerous is it that journalists, based on their political comment they're making in an article or what they're reporting on, that they're blocked?
I think it's incredibly dangerous. Look, the First Amendment is the First Amendment for a reason. And it's not just important to have law and cases and legislation that supports the free exercise of speech. You actually have to have the cultural attitude and the societal acceptance of free speech. You have to have a culture that supports that. And we are rapidly losing that culture as the left takes over nearly every institution of life, whether it's academia or Hollywood or the administrative state, and now tech. I mean, most people increasingly live their lives online, whether it's doing banking or speaking or reading the news. If these people control the conversation, they control the direction of the country, and they know it, and it's why they're doing what they're doing.
Yes, and it is certainly frightening. Well, I want to thank each of you for joining me today, and to everybody watching us, thank you so much. Sean Davis is at Sean MDAV. You're going to find him. And Sohrab Ahmari, you're going to find him at Sohrab Ahmari. So keep up with these guys and stay tuned. We'll have more on the issues of freedom, free speech in Unmuted with Marsha. Thank you, guys.